At $600, this is the world's most expensive priming tool. Is it worth it? In this video, we're going to get hands-on so you can answer that question. Gavin Gee here from UltimateReloader.com. What we have here is the competition primer seeder from Primal Rights. I've had this unit for well over a year now. I've put a ton of cases through it. You've seen it in some of the stories. And what I have here is a second competition primer seeder. That's right. I have multiple precision reloading stations. This unit is going to be stationed at the top of the hill in my shooting range precision reloading center. And I wanted to use this opportunity to do an unboxing. So we're going to get it out of the box. We're going to get it set up, and we're going to talk about some of the unique features that the competition primer seeder was engineered for. So without further ado, let's get this box open. Alrighty. So as you would expect, we have the instructions. There's a foam cutout here where we've got the body of the unit, and we've got the shuttle priming parts, one for large, one for small. And we've got the pickup tubes, which also serve as the drop tubes, as you can see over here on my other unit. So this is what comes with this set. I'm going to carefully cut away the second rod here. Actually, it looks like both rods are here separate. We've got one punch for large primers and one punch for small primers. So the punch and these sliding shuttles are the parts that are specific to each primer size. Of course, you've also got the pickup and drop tubes that are specific to the primer size. Okay, so this is the kit, and what we're going to do next is I'm going to mount this brand new unit on my other Ultimate Reloader bench plate, and then we'll go through the complete setup process from scratch, put a shell holder in, set the depth, and get to priming some cases. So I just removed the other CPS that I had from my Ultimate Reloader bench mounting plate and attached this new CPS unit to it. There's two screws. You could screw it directly to your bench. You could go all the way through. You could use wood screws to go into the top. Inline fabrication also makes a quick change top plate and dedicated mounts for the inline fabrication ultra mount system. So quite a few options there. The first thing you need to decide is which side you want the handle on. If you prefer left-handed operation, you can screw it into the left-hand side of the main shaft here. I prefer right-handed operation, so I'm just going to screw that in on the right-hand side, tighten things up. Very definition-oriented, positive stops there. Absolutely love that. Okay, so we're going to put in the appropriate shell holder. Like I mentioned, this unit uses Lee-style shell holders. This is my first time trying a Frankfurt Arsenal shell holder. The diameter is slightly smaller, but the thickness is roughly the same, within about 1/1000th of an inch, so I think that's going to work just fine. We've got a 9/64 Allen key. I like these Bondus ball screwdriver type. I've also got the appropriate 9/64 simple Allen key here for those two top screws. So we're going to loosen those and take off the top cap. And the way this goes together is you're going to pick the appropriate shuttle. Red for small size primers, black for large size primers, and this just drops right in here. We've got a hole in the bottom that is captured. We're going to put the shell holder on top of that. That looks like that's going to fit pretty well there, and then the top screws go in to clamp everything together. This is where the screwdriver tool is nice. Doesn't take a ton of torque here. Okay, give her a little bit of a tighten, and then the last step is to drop in the appropriate primer rod, or you could think of it as a primer punch. We're using small primers here, so we're going to drop that down in, and then when we raise the handle, we'll just see the end of that poke up. Now I need to load some primers. So after we've loaded our tube of primers, we simply invert and pull the hitch pin. The stack of primers then falls. You're going to actuate the shuttle, and I can see there that we have a primer ready to go. Now we can work on setting our primer seating depth. This is something that we're going to need to do initially to get things dialed in, and then in my experience for subsequent change outs of different cases and whatnot, it's just kind of a double check and maybe click a couple clicks. Every click on the adjustment wheel is 1/1000th of an inch, so we have very good control over that primer seating depth. So I'm going to take some 6.5 Creedmoor cases. These are Lapua small primer pocket cases. And what we're going to do is we're going to actuate the shuttle, make sure we have a primer, insert the case into the shell holder, and then pull on the handle. We can either prime by feel or we can do static depth. And the first time here, we're going to do this by feel so that we can feel the primer being seated, and then right there I can feel it bottoming out. Now we can set the settings shallower and continue to watch the handle fall. I've got a little bit of downward pressure on it here just to make sure that it's going until we see the handle movement stop. That's when we know we would hit the hard stop right at the exact moment when the primer is seated how I just seated it by feel, and that's going to be a really good starting point. Okay, so we went just a little bit beyond, so I'm going to back things off just a couple thousandths of an inch. Okay, go ahead. I can hit that, feel that hit the stop there, and that's not quite deep enough, so I'm going to go 2 more thousandths of an inch. Can you feel 2 thousandths of an inch? I actually can. Yeah, that actually feels different. So you can do this a number of ways. What's actually happening here is, if you look at the side profile of a primer, there's 3 tips of the anvil that protrude. They could protrude 1/1000th of an inch, 4/1000ths of an inch. Really depends on the brand of primer and so on and so forth. And what you want to do is you want to seat that primer into the primer pocket until the anvil tips touch the base of the primer pocket. When the firing pin hits the primer, it's going to move the primer, and that's going to absorb some of the energy. So once those anvil tips are in contact with the primer pocket, you know that they're going to be rigid. When the firing pin hits the primer, the cup is going to deform. The anvil is holding it against the primer compound, and the primer compound ignites, goes through the flash hole, lights the powder, pressure rises, bullet goes out the barrel. So what you have control over is, let's say you have 4/1000ths anvil protrusion, is you have 4/1000ths worth of wiggle room between when those anvil tips touch the primer pocket and when the cup itself comes into full contact with the primer pocket. That's kind of the total adjustment range, and you can experiment with some of those parameters to make sure that you have things optimized for how your rifle wants your ammo and your primer specifically to be seated for optimal results. Now that things are set up, I'm going to go through and prime 10 additional cases to show you kind of what the ongoing workflow looks like here. I like to flick it at the beginning of each sequence, just like that. I can feel that hit the hard stop. I can feel the consistent and linear force. This is a totally unique dynamic of this particular tool. Now when you get rocking and rolling, this thing can hit 1200 cases per hour. Now that would assume that you've got your primer tubes pre-filled. So if you've looked at some of the double alpha products, for instance, Primer Pro, Primafill, didn't have that all the way forward. There we go. That would enable you to get up into those speed ranges. There we go, 10 cases primed. So now that we've seen the competition primer seater in action, let's step back and talk about the design, the materials and construction, who's using it, what they're using it for, and ultimately some factors that will help you decide if this is the right tool for you to invest in. So I had the opportunity to talk with Greg Dykstra, the owner of Primal Rights and the designer inventor of this device. He patented this device. I sat down with him for over an hour on the phone and got the full story. Greg was priming thousands and thousands and thousands of cases with a hand priming tool to the point where he got sort of repetitive stress in his arm and it was affecting his shooting. Yes, if you shoot enough and if you load enough, things like that can become a major problem. And then one day it came to Greg, this rotary drive mechanism. Essentially, inside the CPS, there is a rack and pinion-like device. And that's what makes this device unique, is that linear force model. As you're rotating the main shaft with the lever, there's a linear relationship between the forces at the handle and the forces at the primer punch. The second design detail that's unique here is the combination of that linear force model and the positive hard stop. I talked about that depth adjustment wheel. You can adjust it by 1/1000th of an inch. When you prime a case, that primer punch goes to the same depth each time. Now, if you don't want to use that static depth model for priming, you can set the wheel so that it primes too deep, and you can just stop when you feel the appropriate amount of forces. So you can use it either way. I like to use it with the static depth priming method because I find it's the most consistent for me, and it also makes it really fast, up to that 1200 cases per hour through the priming tool, assuming that you have your tubes loaded. It was designed in the US. Greg designed it and then machined a prototype within a few days with a friend, and a few months later they had these units coming off the CNC machines and ready for production. So it was a really quick turnaround, that process. Designed in the US, machined in the US from US materials. So if that's important to you, that's a great aspect of this particular design. Again, it works with these priming tubes. They have a capacity of 100 primers. It's manually actuated. There's nothing to jam or get bound up. It's very positive in its action. And really, at the end of the day, the way that it functions, the way that it's been machined, and the materials and the finishes that it uses, to me, really leaves nothing on the table. There's nothing more I could want out of a priming tool. So I've known since I got the CPS that competitive shooters love this device, and people that are looking for the best priming tool will gravitate towards this CPS. That's what I've used it for. I've used it for load development. I've used it for some of the scientific testing and the data that I've shared, and also to load ammo for all of the PRS matches that I've competed in since I've gotten the CPS. What was cool was to hear from Greg about some of the other uses and the other demographics of people that are using it. First surprise was commercial ammunition production. That's right, he's got a customer that's put well in excess of 1.5 million cases through to get primed, to the extent that Greg helped him out with some custom hardened parts like the priming punch and so on and so forth. That's a little bit beyond what most people get out of this. He's got several sort of more, semi-commercial clients or consumer clients that are loading ammunition for things like what I mentioned, PRS competitions. Real competitors load a lot more ammo for that in a repetitive sense than I do. So he's got customers in that context, factory unit, totally stock, well in excess of 150,000 cases put through it, still holding up great. Some other people that are using it, youth. This is a very easy design to work with for priming cases. You've got plenty of leverage on the handle. It's really easy to get the cases in and out. It's a great way to have kids feel like they're a part of the process, to help out in the reloading room, and so on and so forth. Also, people with disabilities. You'll notice if you use a hand priming tool, typically it takes two hands. It's a bit more complicated. This device works really well for someone with a disability. It's really easy to actuate the handle. It can be done single-handedly. And in a like manner, elderly folks who might be suffering from arthritis or other inabilities conditions have really liked this tool, and it's yet another demographic of people who it's very popular with. So at this point in the video, you're probably asking yourself, is this something that I would benefit for? Would this be worth the investment for me? Now, my goal in these videos is to show you a product in action, to give you all the speeds and feeds and the facts and figures, and it's really up to you to decide. And I think what would really be the factors you'd want to consider is, how critical is priming to you? If you're a competitive shooter, if you're doing bench rest or PRS, or if you're doing load development, that sort of thing, priming is a really important aspect of that. You can't put a price on having your ammunition be right in a competition. You know, I've had magazine problems. That's cost me the stage. That's something that you can't really quantify in terms of price. If you're looking for a tool that's going to be lifetime, if you want something that is high quality, if you want maximum throughput for off-press priming, this is definitely the tool. If you want to have precise control over primer seating depth, if you want to set up priming factory literally for ultra precise priming, this tool is definitely worth a very close look. So I hope this video has been useful. If it has, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe with notifications, because you're going to see the CPS and other related precision reloading tools a lot more on the channel this coming year. It's spring. I'm really excited to get out and do more load development and shooting. Also, down there in the video description, first link, we'll link over to the article, links to product pages, that kind of thing. I'm also on Patreon, and I've got Ultimate Reloader shirts at the Ultimate Reloader store. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, happy shooting and happy reloading.